And you guys thought you could escape and get beer and get back in time, but sad to say. Our next speaker. Sorry, I was just telling myself my joke in my head, and it was good. Anyway. Our next speaker has been active in contaminated sites assessment, remediation risk assessment, and environmental management for over 16 years. Her experience includes working in environment consulting and as a senior advisor in the Federal Office of Environment and Sustainable Development. Currently, she is the manager of environmental planning at the City of Vancouver, where she manages city-owned contaminated sites, hazardous materials management, corporate zero waste, sustainability initiatives, environmental emergency response, green building, and the environmental regulatory branch. In addition, she leads the city's overall contaminated sites management and brownfields redevelopment strategies. So if this bio does not get you invited to dinner parties, I am not sure what will. Please welcome Jennifer Mayberry.
Hello. So my role at the city is not very glamorous. It's mostly to deal with nasty issues like contaminated sites, asbestos, and environmental emergencies like oil spills. I'm often introduced in meetings as, "This is Jennifer, she's contamination." For the past 18 months, I've been part of a team working to represent the city as an intervener in the Trans Mountain Pipeline's application to the National Energy Board. City Council wanted to understand the real risks and benefits of this proposal to our city, and what we found is that we as a region are ill-equipped to deal with the spill of any material coming in and out of our port. I've dealt with a lot of fuel spills, but nothing that hit home quite like the April 2015 Maratha spill in English Bay. An estimated 2,800 liters of bunker C fuel were lost and 1,400 liters recovered. But even this relatively small amount of oil had a big impact on our city, and it made our work on the Trans Mountain project really real. No one had ever really assessed the impact of an oil spill in Burrard Inlet before, but it's obviously an area of importance to us. So the city, as intervener, commissioned research from leading independent experts and academics from around the world to help us assess the real risks to our people, prosperity, and environment. As you may have heard this evening, Kinder Morgan is seeking approval to build a second pipeline from Alberta to Burnaby, twinning their existing pipeline and tripling their capacity from 300,000 to 890,000 barrels of oil a day. They want to increase the number of tankers that would come into their Westridge Marine Terminal in Burnaby from 5 to 34 a month. And this would mean over 400 oil tankers a year navigating the shallow and narrow waters of Burrard Inlet. The pipeline would carry diluted bitumen, or dilbit, and when dilbit spilled, the lighter end components like benzene quickly evaporate, and what's left behind becomes even heavier. And our experts found that dilbit is naturally prone to submerge in fresh and salt water. But in warm summer temperatures with moderate wave action, if dilbit was spilled in Burrard Inlet, it would begin to sink in 24 hours. Now, Trans Mountain says that the risk of a spill is low, but they've underestimated the risk because they haven't evaluated the consequences of a spill in Burrard Inlet. They've just assumed it could never happen here. And if risk assessments are going to be robust, they have to look at all the possible scenarios. While the likelihood of a spill may be low, the consequences would be devastating. It's kind of like an earthquake. So think of the Maratha, which was about 2,800 liters. Trans Mountain's definition of a worst-case spill from a tanker is 16 million liters. But the tankers that come into their marine facility in Burnaby carry 80 million liters of oil. Now, to me, I may be paranoid, but that is a worst-case scenario. Our oil spill model developers modeled 4 worst-case scenarios for spills in Burrard Inlet using real wind and tidal data. And in each scenario, 50 to 90% of that oil hit our shorelines within hours. Here's a version of the model for a 16 million liter spill, Trans Mountain's worst-case scenario, near the Lions Gate Bridge over 72 hours. Each dot on this model, which I hope works, represents 2,000 liters of oil. So what's at risk? Pretty much everything we love about Vancouver and a few more things. It's our seawall, our beaches, our amazing views. It's the clean environment that gives us a healthy place to live, work, and play. It's also thousands of jobs and millions of dollars to our economy. A large spill in Vancouver Harbor could result in significant air quality and human health impacts, with people being exposed to unsafe levels of evaporated gases. And Metro Vancouver wanted to better assess these risks, so they commissioned research that found that in the event of a spill, up to 1 million people in the region could be exposed to unsafe benzene concentrations. And in some parts of the city, people would actually collapse from the fumes. Our wildlife's also at risk. The pipeline makes 700 water crossings, and 80 of them are in the Lower Fraser River watershed. Our expert found that a large spill could kill up to 100,000 sea and shorebirds, jeopardize the endangered southern resident killer whale population, and result in salmon actually ingesting droplets of oil. And lastly, our economy could be at risk. Our experts looked at the potential economic impacts of a spill to some key ocean-dependent activities like shipping, tourism, and what was the other one? Commercial fishing. And they found that a large spill would have immediate and adverse impacts on these industries and have significant economic losses to the region. And at the end of the day, the cost and the impacts of spills are always local. Before the responders arrive, local governments are there. And long after the recovery teams leave, locals are left with the lasting effects. Local governments and their taxpayers incur costs from things like emergency services, evacuations, communications, and volunteer management, and many other costs that they may never recuperate the costs from. The numbers on this slide aren't total costs associated with a spill. They're just the costs that the responsible parties had to pay out. And lastly, the quick response and recovery of oil is really important, but it's also really hard to do, and we learned that during the Marathasa. Oil spill response is influenced by things like darkness, cloud cover, and the availability of equipment. And our experts found that there is no location along the Trans Mountain tanker route where response is always possible. And in the wintertime, it's not possible 56 to 78% of the time. So these risks aren't hypothetical, they're real, and I'll show you a couple of examples. In 2010, an Enbridge pipeline ruptured near Marshall, Michigan, and it released 3 million liters of dilbit into the Kalamazoo River. Almost immediately, people started to complain of strong, noxious odors, headaches, nausea, and respiratory issues. And the local health authorities scrambled to try to treat hundreds of patients in a small community with adverse health effects. The 2007 Hebei spirit spill is a good example of the unpredictable events that can cause a spill and the associated effects. A barge being towed by a tug broke free and collided with an anchored oil carrier. It punctured 3 of its 5 tanks and released 11 million liters of heavy crude 8 kilometers from shore. 30 beaches and thousands of hectares of marine cultivation facilities were oiled, and emergency responders working together with 1.3 million volunteers were able to clean up 20% of the oil. So these risks are real, and in reviewing the Trans Mountain Pipeline application, city staff, backed by expert evidence, determined that it's not in our best interest, and Vancouver City Council voted to not support the proposal. Instead, we want to focus on supporting what's already the fastest growing area of our economy, the green job sector, and make Vancouver the greenest city in the world by 2020 and be entirely dependent on renewable energy by 2050. To me, the choice is obvious, but we would like to hear your thoughts.